Now, returning to our main story on the initiative to use U.S. shuttle diplomacy between Russia and Ukraine in Saudi Arabia on Monday, Ambassador Meera Shankar, former Ambassador of India to the United States, joins us with her analysis. Thank you, ma'am, for being with us. Now, how will U.S.'s shuttle diplomacy actually be executed in Jeddah? Is it, the best way also of getting both Russia and Ukraine to a meeting point?
Well, I think it's going to take time. It's not going to be so easy because there are vast differences between the positions of the two sides as yet. Even on a temporary ceasefire for 3 months, there has been no agreement. While Ukraine has accepted, Russia has said that, it has certain conditions and those would need to be discussed. So, including that Ukraine should not be armed in the meanwhile, the supply of weapons to Ukraine should stop, and so on. So it's going to be a bit complex because the positions of the two sides are very far apart at the moment.
Also, how might, the U.S.'s proposal to take control of Ukraine's nuclear power plants affect the perception of its role as a fair negotiator?
Well, the U.S. has already, insisted on an agreement on critical minerals in Ukraine. And now it has said it could take over the running of the nuclear power plants in Ukraine. But I think Zelensky has not agreed to that as yet. So I think it's something which remains to be seen, what emerges, because these are major, suppliers of electricity to Ukraine. And what Zelensky has said is if they would like to invest, to expand or to upgrade, then that's a different issue. But just to take over existing nuclear power plants is not something that he is agreeable to at the moment.
Ma'am, also, what are the implications of the U.S.'s economic and strategic interests in Ukraine for broader peace? Because they could also provide an incentive, isn't it, for the parties to do business. After all, the rare earths deal is one instance. Russia seems to be also interested in rare earths, in selling it to the United States. Yes.
Russia has expressed its willingness to do a deal on critical minerals with the U.S., including in the parts of Ukraine which it is in control of right now. And the U.S. has also pointed out that while it is not willing to put boots on the ground by way of peacekeeping, it is willing to, be a partner for the critical minerals development in Ukraine, and that this U.S. economic presence would mean that the U.S. is invested in longer-term peace and security in Ukraine.
Ambassador Meera Shankar, also, how does Europe view the U.S.'s involvement in ceasefire talks, given that the U.S. has these interests, as we had been talking about, in access to resources?
Well, Europe has taken a different position to that of the U.S. Because it is still continuing to provide military aid and defense equipment to Ukraine. And France and the UK have been talking about what kind of troop deployments they could do by way of peacekeeping and guaranteeing Ukraine's security after a deal is signed. Now, here again, you can see the difficulties because the Russians have said that NATO troops in Ukraine by way of peacekeeping or any other role will not be acceptable to them. And you can see their point of view as well, because they say that the whole intervention was occasioned by Ukraine's push for NATO membership, and that part of any deal would be that Ukraine would have to give up, its efforts to get NATO membership and be neutral. So
Right.
there is a big gap. On the one hand, Ukraine is concerned about its security and how does it prevent, any further military intrusions by Russia after a peace deal. How does it deter that?
Right.
And on the other hand, Russia is concerned that by way of peacekeeping, NATO forces should not be on its doorstep, even if Ukraine is not a NATO member.
Right.
So it won't accept troops there. So there's quite a big gulf in the positions of the two sides. But what is fairly clear is President Trump is very determined
Okay.
to try to find a way to
Indeed.
halt the conflict and to end it if possible.
Now, Germany, of course, which is the big player in Europe, has actually approved $3.25 billion of fresh military aid to Ukraine, and this has happened today, and the talks are on Monday. And you, I know, have served as our ambassador in Germany as well. So, how does this, does it create a problem? I mean, you did mention that it's going to probably create a problem, but how does one actually get Europe involved in a workable peace is what I'm trying to ask, given that they are supporting Ukraine so openly?
Well, I think the US will have to find some way of bringing Europe in and then looking at what kind of compromises can be struck. At the moment, I think everybody is taking their maximalist positions. And of course, the whole of Europe is not united because Italy is opposed to continuing to provide defense assistance. Hungary certainly is opposed. So there are different voices within Europe. Of course, the big powers in Europe, UK, France, and Germany, all are on the same page as far as strengthening Ukraine to negotiate from a position of strength is concerned.
We leave it there. Thank you very much, Ambassador Meera Shankar, and putting that into perspective for us. We look forward to these talks on Monday.